The storm hit without warning, and Annette Winters felt the stagecoach lurch violently to the side just before the door flew open and she was hurled into the darkness, her scream swallowed by thunder that shook the very earth beneath her. The year was 1883, and California's desert storms were notorious for their sudden fury, but nothing had prepared her for the absolute terror of tumbling through rain-soaked air before crashing into something hard that knocked the breath from her lungs. Pain exploded through her left shoulder and ribs, and then everything went black as the storm raged around her unconscious form. Nathaniel Parker had been riding toward Randsburg, California, when he saw the lightning split the sky ahead, illuminating the desert landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. He was a ranch hand returning from a cattle drive to Bakersfield, 26 years old with sun-bronzed skin and hands calloused from years of hard work. His horse danced nervously beneath him as the wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of rain and something else, something that made his gut clench with worry. He had planned to reach town before nightfall, but the storm had other ideas, and he was still a good 5 miles out when he heard it, the distinct sound of a stagecoach in distress, horses screaming, wood splintering. Nathan kicked his mount into a gallop, riding hard toward the sound, despite the rain that now pelted his face like tiny stones. His heart hammered in his chest as he crested a rise and saw the overturned stagecoach in the ravine below, one wheel still spinning uselessly in the air. The horses had broken free from their traces and disappeared into the storm, and he could see the driver sprawled on the ground, moving slowly. Nathan guided his horse down the treacherous slope, his mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. The driver was alive, barely, clutching his arm at an unnatural angle. "There was a woman," he gasped as Nathan knelt beside him. "Young lady heading to Randsburg. The door flew open. I heard her scream. She was thrown out before we overturned." Nathan's blood ran cold. "How far back?" "I do not know. Maybe a mile, maybe less. The storm came so fast." The driver coughed, and Nathan could see blood on his lips. "You have to find her." Nathan made the driver as comfortable as possible, fashioning a crude shelter from pieces of the broken stagecoach. He gave the injured man his canteen and his spare blanket, knowing it might not be enough but having no other choice. "I will send help from Randsburg," he promised, then mounted his horse and turned back into the storm. The rain was coming down in sheets now, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Nathan rode slowly, methodically, his eyes scanning the ground on both sides of the rutted road. Lightning flashed, and in those brief moments of illumination, he searched desperately for any sign of the missing woman. His clothes were soaked through, and water streamed from the brim of his hat, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was someone out here, alone, possibly injured, possibly dying. An hour passed, then 2. Nathan's horse was exhausted, stumbling over rocks and struggling through the mud that the desert floor had become. He talked to the animal constantly, encouraging it, praising it, keeping them both focused on the task at hand. "Just a little further, boy. We cannot give up. She is out here somewhere." As the night deepened, the storm began to show signs of weakening, but that brought little comfort. The temperature was dropping, and Nathan knew that hypothermia could kill as surely as any injury. He had been riding for nearly 3 hours, covering the road multiple times, when he decided to expand his search pattern. She might have been thrown clear of the road entirely, might be lying in a gully or behind a rock formation. He guided his horse in wider and wider circles, calling out into the darkness. "Hello! Can you hear me? If you are out there, make a sound!" His voice was hoarse from shouting, barely audible over the wind, but he kept trying. The alternative, giving up, was not something he could accept. It was nearly midnight when his horse suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward, refusing to move despite Nathan's urging. He dismounted, trusting the animal's instincts, and began to search on foot. That was when he saw her, a pale shape against the dark ground, lying in a shallow depression about 30 yards from the road. She was on her side, one arm bent beneath her, her long brown hair plastered to her face and neck. For a terrifying moment, Nathan thought she was dead, but as he dropped to his knees beside her, he felt the flutter of breath against his hand. "Thank God," he whispered, then louder, "Miss, can you hear me? I'm here to help you." There was no response. Nathan quickly assessed her condition as best he could in the darkness. Her left shoulder looked wrong, possibly dislocated or broken, and when he carefully felt her ribs, she moaned softly, confirming his suspicion that some were cracked. She was ice cold, her lips tinged blue even in the dim light. He needed to get her warm and dry, and he needed to do it fast. Randsburg was too far, especially in these conditions, but Nathan knew these lands. There was an old line shack about 2 miles east, used by ranchers during roundups. It was not much, but it would have 4 walls and a roof, and that was more than they had now. He carefully lifted the woman, trying not to jostle her injured shoulder, and was struck by how light she felt in his arms, how fragile. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with delicate features and hands that had clearly never done hard labor. Getting her onto his horse was a challenge, but Nathan managed, holding her in front of him as he turned the exhausted animal toward the line shack. Every step seemed to take an eternity, but finally he saw the low structure emerging from the darkness. He had never been so grateful to see such a humble building in his entire life. The door was unlocked, as line shacks always were, meant to provide shelter to anyone who needed it. Nathan carried the woman inside and laid her gently on the single wooden bunk. There was a small stove, and by some miracle, dry wood stacked beside it. Within minutes he had a fire going, and blessed warmth began to fill the tiny space, but warmth alone would not be enough. The woman's clothes were soaked through, and leaving her in them would be dangerous. Nathan wrestled with propriety for about half a second before practicality won out. Her life was more important than her modesty, and he was not about to let her die of exposure because of social conventions. He worked quickly and clinically, removing her wet dress, petticoats, and undergarments, trying not to think about anything except keeping her alive. There were blankets stored in a trunk, musty but dry, and he wrapped her in several layers before adding his own dry shirt from his saddlebag. Only then did he allow himself to truly look at her face. Even pale and unconscious, she was beautiful, with high cheekbones and a small, determined chin. Her eyelashes lay dark against her cheeks, and her lips, slowly losing their blue tinge, were full and expressive. Nathan found himself wondering what color her eyes were, what her voice sounded like, who she was, and what had brought her to California. He set about making her as comfortable as possible, carefully positioning her injured arm and ribs. He knew he should probably try to set the shoulder, but he did not trust himself to do it correctly in these conditions. Better to wait until he could get her to a doctor in Randsburg. For now, he had done all he could. Nathan stripped off his own wet clothes and hung them near the stove to dry, then wrapped himself in the remaining blankets. He pulled a chair close to the bunk so he could monitor the woman through the night. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and her skin felt warmer to the touch. These were good signs, but he knew she was not out of danger yet. As the hours crept by, Nathan found himself talking to her, the words flowing more easily in the darkness. "You gave me quite a scare tonight, miss. I have been riding these territories for 10 years now, and I have seen some rough situations, but searching for you in that storm was the longest few hours of my life. You just keep breathing, you hear me? You fought this hard to survive, so do not quit now." Toward dawn, as gray light began to seep through the cracks in the walls, the woman stirred. Nathan was at her side instantly, watching as her eyelids fluttered open to reveal eyes the color of warm honey. Confusion clouded them for a moment, then fear, and she tried to sit up, gasping at the pain the movement caused. "Easy now," Nathan said gently, his hand on her uninjured shoulder. "You are safe. You were thrown from a stagecoach during the storm. I found you and brought you here." Annette's eyes darted around the unfamiliar space, taking in the rough wooden walls, the fire crackling in the stove, and finally, the man beside her. He was handsome in a rugged way, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, gray eyes that held genuine concern, and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. She became suddenly aware that she was not wearing her own clothes, and color flooded her pale cheeks. "I apologize for the liberty I took with your garments," Nathan said quickly, reading her expression. "But they were soaked through, and I needed to get you warm. Your modesty was never compromised beyond what was necessary for your survival." Annette's initial embarrassment faded as she processed his words. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, see the genuine worry in his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her throat raw. "You saved my life." "Nathaniel Parker," he introduced himself, "but everyone calls me Nathan." "Annette Winters." She tried to smile, but it turned into a wince as pain shot through her ribs. How badly am I hurt? Nathan explained what he had found, his voice steady and reassuring. Your shoulder needs proper medical attention, and those ribs need to be bound. Once the sun is fully up and you feel strong enough to travel, I will take you to Randsburg. There is a doctor there, Doc Henderson. He is good at what he does. The driver, Annette said suddenly, struggling to remember. Is he all right? Nathan hesitated, then decided honesty was best. He was injured but alive when I left him. I made him as comfortable as I could, but I had to make a choice. Help him or search for you. I chose you. Something in the way he said it made Annette's heart skip. This stranger had ridden into a storm, searched for hours, and risked his own safety to find her. She looked at him with new eyes, noting the exhaustion that lined his face, the way his hands trembled slightly from cold and fatigue. You look like you could use some rest yourself. I am fine, Nathan insisted, but even as he spoke, his eyes were heavy. He had been awake for nearly 24 hours, and the adrenaline that had kept him going was finally wearing off. Sleep, Annette said firmly, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. You have done everything you can for me. Rest for a few hours. I promise I will wake you if anything changes. Nathan wanted to argue, but his body had other ideas. He nodded reluctantly and settled into the chair, his head falling forward almost immediately. Within moments, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Annette watched him for a long time, this stranger who had become her savior, and felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. The morning sun was well up when Nathan jerked awake, disoriented for a moment before memory flooded back. He looked quickly at the bunk and found Annette watching him, her eyes clear and alert. You let me sleep too long, he said, but there was no real accusation in his tone. You needed it. Besides, I've been entertaining myself by trying to figure out your story. Ranch hand, I think, based on your hands and the way you carry yourself. Probably from around here, given how well you know the territory. Unmarried, because no ring and no mention of a wife. She paused, a slight smile playing at her lips despite the pain she was clearly in. How am I doing? Nathan felt himself grinning. Pretty accurate. I work at the Double Bar Ranch, about 10 miles north of Randsburg. Been there since I was 16. As for unmarried, well, ranching does not leave much time for courting. And yet here you are, rescuing maidens in distress. Annette's smile widened, then faded as a wave of pain crossed her face. Nathan was immediately concerned. We should get you to town. Can you ride? I will manage, Annette said with more confidence than she felt. I am tougher than I look. Getting her dressed was an awkward affair, but they managed, with Nathan helping her into her now dry but wrinkled dress while carefully averting his eyes as much as possible. Her shoulder made it nearly impossible to raise her left arm, and Nathan had to fashion a makeshift sling from a strip of blanket. Every movement clearly pained her, but she did not complain, and Nathan found himself impressed by her fortitude. The ride to Randsburg was slow and careful, with Annette seated in front of Nathan on his horse, his arms around her providing support and warmth. She leaned back against his chest, too exhausted and hurting to care about propriety, and Nathan tried to ignore how right it felt to hold her like this. They talked to pass the time, sharing pieces of their stories. Annette had come from Boston, she told him, sent west by her aunt after her parents had died in a house fire the previous winter. Aunt Miriam runs a boarding house in Randsburg. I've never met her, but she wrote offering me a home and a chance to start fresh. After everything that happened, I needed that. I needed to be somewhere that did not remind me of them at every turn. Nathan heard the grief in her voice, the still raw pain of loss, and he found himself wanting to comfort her. I am sorry about your parents. I lost my mother when I was 12. Fever took her. My father raised me and my 2 sisters alone until he passed 5 years ago. It gets easier, the missing them, but it never really goes away. I do not want it to go away, Annette said softly. The pain means they mattered, that they were loved. I would rather hurt than forget. You will not forget, Nathan assured her. The good memories, they start to shine brighter than the sad ones, eventually. You just have to give it time. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the desert landscape spreading out around them in shades of gold and rust. The storm had left the air clean and crisp, and wildflowers were already beginning to poke through the damp earth, eager to make the most of the unexpected moisture. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, and Annette found herself falling in love with it despite everything. Randsburg appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of wooden buildings that seemed almost defiant in their existence in this barren landscape. The town had grown up around the gold and silver mining operations, and though those were playing out, enough people remained to keep it alive. As they rode down the main street, curious faces turned to watch, and whispers followed in their wake. Nathan guided his horse directly to Doc Henderson's office, a small building marked by a hand-painted sign. The doctor himself appeared at the sound of hooves, a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. He took one look at Annette and immediately began issuing orders. "Get her inside, onto the examination table. Carefully now, that shoulder looks dislocated." The next hour was a blur of pain for Annette, as Doc Henderson examined her injuries, set her shoulder with a sickening pop that made her cry out despite her best efforts, and carefully bound her ribs. Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her good hand and talking her through the worst of it. When it was finally over, Annette was pale and shaking, but the relief on her face was evident. "You were lucky," Doc Henderson told her bluntly. "Another few hours in that cold, and we would be having a very different conversation. You have Mr. Parker here to thank for your life." He turned to Nathan. "You did good work, son. Not many men would have searched all night in that storm." Nathan ducked his head, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. "No," the doctor said firmly, "they would not have. You are a good man, Nathaniel Parker, and do not let anyone tell you different." The question of where Annette would stay was solved when a plump, energetic woman in her 50s burst through the doctor's door, her face flushed with worry. "I heard there was a young woman brought in, thrown from the Stagecoach. Is she here? Is she all right?" "Aunt Miriam?" Annette asked tentatively. "Oh, my dear girl." Miriam Winters rushed to Annette's side, her eyes brimming with tears. "When I heard about the accident, I feared the worst. I've been beside myself with worry. Thank heavens you are alive." Annette found herself enveloped in a warm, jasmine-scented hug that made her think of her own mother. And suddenly, she was crying. All the fear and pain and grief of the past 24 hours pouring out in great, heaving sobs. Miriam held her through it all, making soothing noises and stroking her hair, and over her aunt's shoulder, Annette caught Nathan's eye. He smiled at her, a gentle, understanding smile, and something passed between them in that moment, something that felt like a promise. The boarding house was everything Annette could have hoped for, warm, clean, and filled with the smell of fresh bread and lemon polish. Miriam fussed over her like a mother hen, settling her into a sunny room on the second floor and bringing her tea and soup. But as grateful as Annette was for her aunt's care, she found her thoughts constantly drifting to Nathan, wondering where he was, if he was resting, if she would see him again. She did not have to wonder long. Nathan appeared at the boarding house the next afternoon, hat in hand, looking freshly scrubbed and slightly nervous. Miriam showed him up to Annette's room with a knowing twinkle in her eye, and Annette's heart leaped when he appeared in the doorway. "I wanted to check on you," Nathan said, twisting his hat in his hands. "Make sure you were settling in all right." "I am doing well, thanks to you." Annette gestured to the chair beside her bed. "Please, sit. Tell me what happened with the stagecoach driver. Did they send help?" Nathan nodded, settling into the chair. "First thing I did after getting you to the doctor, a group rode out and found him. He is banged up pretty bad, broken arm and some cracked ribs, but he will recover. The stagecoach is a total loss, though, and the horses scattered. Only found 2 of them so far." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as water. Nathan told her about ranch life, about the cattle drives and the long days under the sun, the simple satisfaction of hard work well done. Annette shared stories of Boston, of cobblestone streets and gas lamps, of the opera and museums and all the things she had left behind. They were from such different worlds, and yet they found common ground in unexpected places, a shared love of books, a similar sense of humor, a mutual appreciation for honest work and honest people. When Nathan finally rose to leave, the room was dim with approaching twilight. "I should let you rest. Doc Henderson said you need to take it easy for at least a few weeks." "Will you come back?" Annette asked, then immediately felt foolish for being so forward. I mean, I would enjoy the company. Aunt Miriam is wonderful, but she has the boarding house to run, and I will go mad if I have to spend all day in this room with nothing but my thoughts. Nathan's face broke into a warm smile. I would like that. I am back at the ranch now, but I have Sundays off. Could I call on you then? I would like that very much, Annette replied, her heart singing. True to his word, Nathan appeared the following Sunday, and the Sunday after that, and every Sunday for the next 2 months. Sometimes they sat in Annette's room, sometimes in the boarding house parlor under Miriam's watchful but approving eye, and as Annette's injuries healed and she grew stronger, they began taking walks around Randsburg. Nathan showed her the town, introducing her to shopkeepers and miners, to ranchers and their families. Annette was surprised by how quickly Randsburg began to feel like home, but she knew it had less to do with the place and more to do with the man beside her. She loved the way Nathan's face lit up when he talked about the ranch, the gentle way he handled everything from frightened horses to flustered shopkeepers. She loved his quiet strength, his dry humor, the way he seemed to see right through her polite social mask to the real woman beneath, and slowly, carefully, she began to open her heart to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could love again after loss. Nathan was equally captivated. Annette was unlike any woman he had ever known, educated and well-spoken, yes, but also brave and resilient, with a core of steel beneath her refined exterior. She had survived a trauma that would have broken lesser people, and instead of retreating into herself, she was embracing her new life with both hands. He loved her quick wit, her curiosity about everything, the way she listened when he talked like his words actually mattered. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments during his work, imagining her face, her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. It was during one of their walks, 3 months after the night of the storm, that things shifted between them. They had walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open desert and were watching the sunset in a blaze of orange and red. The air was cooling, carrying with it the scent of sage and creosote, and Annette shivered slightly. Without thinking, Nathan shrugged out of his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The gesture was simple, protective, and something about it made Annette's breath catch. She looked up at him, at the way the dying light caught in his gray eyes, and suddenly the words were tumbling out before she could stop them. "I'm falling in love with you, Nathan Parker." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever, and Annette immediately regretted her boldness. This was not how things were done. A lady did not declare her feelings. She waited for the gentleman to speak first. But she had never been very good at following rules, and after everything she had been through, pretending felt like a waste of precious time. Nathan stared at her, his expression unreadable, and Annette felt her heart begin to sink. But then he smiled, slow and warm like sunrise, and reached out to cup her face in his work-roughened hands. "I have been in love with you since the moment I found you in that storm," he said quietly. "I just did not think a woman like you could ever feel the same about a man like me." "What does that mean, a woman like me?" Annette challenged, even as joy was blooming in her chest. "Educated, refined, from a good family. You could have any man you wanted, Annette. I'm just a ranch hand with dirt under my fingernails and no prospects beyond the next paycheck." Annette placed her hands over his, pressing them more firmly against her cheeks. "You are the man who rode through a storm to save me. You are kind and brave and honest. You see me, Nathan, really see me. Not just the Boston finishing school manners and the proper diction. You make me feel alive in a way I never did back east, where everything was about appearances and expectations. So yes, I could have any man I wanted, and I want you." Nathan kissed her then, a soft, tentative meeting of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Annette rose on her toes, winding her good arm around his neck, losing herself in the taste and feel of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have much to offer you," he said seriously, "but what I have is yours. My heart, my loyalty, my protection. I will work every day to make sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Annette whispered. "You are everything I did not know I needed." They courted properly after that, though everyone in Randsburg already knew they were meant for each other. Nathan spoke to Miriam, asking her blessing to court her niece with the intention of marriage, and Miriam gave it gladly. That boy saved your life and stole your heart in the same night, she told Annette with a laugh. I would be a fool to stand in the way of that kind of love. Nathan saved every penny he could, planning for their future. He talked to his boss at the Double Bar Ranch, a gruff but fair man named Samuel Porter, about his intentions. Porter, who had known Nathan since he was a green 16-year-old kid, clapped him on the shoulder and offered him a better position. Foreman, with a small house on the ranch property and a substantial increase in wages. You have earned it, son, Porter said. Best worker I have ever had, and smart with it. I was wondering how long it would take you to ask for more. The fact that you are doing it for a woman makes it even better. A good woman will make a good man great. With his prospects improved and a home to offer, Nathan proposed to Annette on a Sunday afternoon in early October 1883, exactly 6 months after the night he found her. They had ridden out to the line shack where he had taken her that stormy night, the place where her new life had truly begun. It was a clear, beautiful day, nothing like that violent evening, and Annette felt a strange sense of coming full circle as she stood in the doorway looking at the small space. I brought you here for a reason, Nathan said, taking her hand. This is where I realized how much you would come to mean to me. I sat in that chair watching over you, and even though I barely knew you, I was terrified of losing you. I knew somehow that you were going to change my life. You changed mine, Annette replied, squeezing his fingers. You gave me a second chance when I did not think I deserved one. Nathan knelt then, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band set with a small sapphire. It was my mother's, he explained, the only thing I have left of her. My father gave it to me before he died and told me to save it for the woman who made my heart sing. Annette Winters, you are that woman. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here in this wild, beautiful place? Annette dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him deeply. Yes, she said against his lips. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married in November, just as the desert was settling into its mild winter. It was a small ceremony in the Randsburg church, with Miriam weeping happy tears and Nathan's rancher friends filling the pews. Annette wore a simple cream-colored dress that Miriam had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers that Nathan had ridden out at dawn to collect. She had never felt more beautiful than she did walking down that short aisle toward the man she loved, seeing the absolute wonder and joy in his eyes as he watched her approach. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but they meant every word with a depth born of shared hardship and hard-won love. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tenderness that more than a few people in the congregation had to dab at their eyes. They were starting their life together with nothing but love and determination, but for Annette and Nathan, that was more than enough. The house on the Double Bar Ranch was small but sturdy, 2 rooms and a kitchen with a view of the mountains that took Annette's breath away. Nathan had spent weeks fixing it up before the wedding, repairing the roof and building furniture with his own hands. He carried her over the threshold on their wedding night, and they made love for the first time with the desert wind singing outside their windows and the stars bright overhead. Annette had been nervous, her only knowledge of marital intimacy coming from whispered conversations with married friends back in Boston. But Nathan was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. The initial discomfort quickly gave way to pleasure, and Annette discovered a passionate side of herself she had not known existed. Afterward, lying tangled together in their bed, Nathan traced patterns on her bare shoulder and whispered how much he loved her, how lucky he was, how he would spend every day of his life making her happy. You already make me happy, Annette assured him, kissing his chest. Just being with you is enough. Life on the ranch was hard work, but Annette threw herself into it with characteristic determination. She learned to cook over a wood stove, to tend a garden in the unforgiving desert soil, to preserve food for the winter months. Miriam visited often, teaching her niece the practical skills she would need, and Annette proved to be a quick study. She also took over some of the ranch bookkeeping, her neat handwriting, and a head for figures impressing Samuel Porter so much that he increased Nathan's wages again. Nathan, for his part, bloomed under the influence of married life. He had always been a hard worker, but now he had purpose beyond just surviving. He was building something, creating a home and a future for the woman he loved. He taught Annette to ride properly, not the side-saddle nonsense she had learned back east, but real riding, astride with confidence and control. They would ride out together on Sunday afternoons, exploring the desert, discovering hidden canyons and secret springs, making love under the open sky, with the kind of freedom that would have scandalized Boston society. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. The ranch work was grueling, especially during calving season when Nathan would be gone from before dawn until well after dark. Money was tight, despite the increased wages, and there were times when Annette had to get creative with meals, stretching what little they had. A drought that first summer tested everyone's resolve, and they watched anxiously as water sources dried up and cattle grew thin. But through it all, they had each other. On the hardest days, when Nathan came home exhausted and discouraged, Annette was there with a hot meal and understanding words. When Annette struggled with homesickness for the life she had left behind, Nathan held her and reminded her of all the reasons they were building something better. They talked about everything, sharing their fears and dreams and hopes for the future, building a foundation of trust and communication that would sustain them through whatever life threw their way. It was in the spring of 1885, a year and a half into their marriage, that Annette realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, noticing the changes in her body, the fatigue and nausea that came in waves. But she waited to be sure before telling Nathan, visiting Doc Henderson in town on a day when Nathan was away moving cattle to summer pasture. The doctor confirmed what she already knew, and Annette rode home with her heart full to bursting. She planned an elaborate reveal, cooking Nathan's favorite meal and wearing the new dress she had been saving for a special occasion. But when Nathan walked through the door that evening and saw her face, all her careful plans flew out of her head. "I'm going to have a baby," she blurted out. "Our baby. You are going to be a father." Nathan froze for a heartbeat, his face blank with shock, and then he was across the room, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby! Annette, we are going to have a baby!" He set her down carefully, immediately concerned. "Should I have done that? Did I hurt you? What did the doctor say?" Annette laughed, grabbing his face and kissing him soundly. "I am pregnant, not fragile. Doc Henderson says everything looks good. The baby should come in late November, maybe early December." They spent that night making plans, talking about names and what they would need, how they would adjust their small house to accommodate a child. Nathan was almost giddy with excitement, already imagining teaching his son or daughter to ride, to rope, to love this land as much as he did. Annette watched him with a tender smile, falling in love with him all over again, as she saw the kind of father he would be. The pregnancy progressed well, though Annette found the summer heat particularly brutal in her condition. Miriam visited often, sharing wisdom from her years of helping young mothers in Randsburg. Nathan became even more protective, insisting that Annette rest more, do less heavy work, let him handle things that she was perfectly capable of managing. They bickered about it good-naturedly, Annette insisting she was not an invalid, Nathan arguing that he was just taking care of his girls. "Girls?" Annette asked with raised eyebrows. "You think it is a girl?" Nathan shrugged, looking slightly sheepish. "I just have a feeling. But boy or girl, as long as you both are healthy, I will be the happiest man alive." As it turned out, Nathan's feeling was right. Annette went into labor on a cold December morning, 3 days after her 24th birthday. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 18 hours, and there were moments when Nathan thought he might lose his mind from fear and helplessness. He paced outside their bedroom door while Miriam and Doc Henderson worked inside, every cry from Annette like a knife to his heart. But when the baby finally came, a healthy girl with a surprisingly loud voice and a shock of dark hair, Nathan felt his world tilt on its axis. Doc Henderson placed the squirming, wailing infant in his arms, and Nathan looked down at his daughter with absolute wonder. She was tiny and perfect, with Annette's delicate features and his gray eyes, and he fell completely in love in that instant. "You can go in now," Doc Henderson said with a tired smile. "Your wife wants to meet her daughter." Annette was propped up against pillows, pale and exhausted, but smiling. Her face lit up when Nathan entered with their baby, and he carefully placed the infant in her arms. "She is perfect," Annette whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look what we made, Nathan. Look at her." "What should we name her?" Nathan asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and putting his arm around his wife. They had discussed names, but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their daughter, Annette said quietly, "Rose. I want to name her Rose, after your mother. You told me once that she was the strongest, kindest person you ever knew. I hope our daughter grows up to be like that." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "Rose Parker. It is perfect. Thank you." Baby Rose proved to be a healthy, happy child with her father's disposition and her mother's curiosity. As the months passed and she grew, the little house on the Double Bar Ranch filled with the sounds of her laughter and babbling. Nathan was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his daughter, marveling at each new development. Annette often found him just watching Rose sleep, a look of such profound love on his face that it made her heart ache. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan continued to excel in his position as foreman, and Samuel Porter made it clear that he was being groomed to eventually take over management of the ranch. The wages and respect that came with his position allowed Nathan and Annette to save money, to dream bigger dreams. They talked about buying their own land someday, starting their own ranch, building something to pass down to Rose and whatever other children might come. Those other children came in due course. A son, whom they named James, was born in 1887, 2 years after Rose. He was a sturdy, serious baby who grew into a thoughtful little boy, always watching, always thinking. Then came another daughter, Grace, in 1889, sunny and sweet-tempered from the start. Their house was bursting at the seams, full of noise and life and love. Annette sometimes thought back to that terrified girl who had been thrown from a stagecoach into a raging storm, who had lost everything and been ready to give up. She could hardly recognize herself in that person. The woman she had become was stronger, braver, more capable than she ever imagined she could be. She had built a life here in this harsh desert, had raised children and made a home and found a kind of happiness that went bone deep. And it was all because of Nathan, the cowboy who had refused to give up, who had searched through the night until he found her. He had saved her life that night, but he had done so much more than that. He had given her a reason to live, to hope, to love again. Every morning when she woke up beside him, every evening when she watched him play with their children, every night when they lay tangled together in the darkness, she thanked whatever force had brought them together. Nathan felt the same way. His life before Annette seemed like a faded photograph, something that had happened to someone else. She had brought color and meaning to his existence, had made him believe he was capable of more than he had ever dreamed. He loved her more with each passing year, loved the woman she had become, loved the mother she was, loved the partner who stood beside him through everything. They had their share of hard times, of course. A particularly brutal winter in 1890 killed off a significant portion of the Double Bar's herd, and everyone took a pay cut to help the ranch survive. Nathan's younger sister died in childbirth that same year, and he grieved hard for the loss. Money was always tight with a growing family, and there were times when Nathan wondered if he would ever be able to give Annette the life she deserved. But Annette always seemed to know when his doubts crept in. She would take his face in her hands and remind him that she had everything she needed. "You are enough, Nathan Parker. You have always been enough. I did not marry you for wealth or status. I married you because you are the best man I have ever known, and I would not trade this life for anything." In 1892, Samuel Porter made Nathan an offer that would change everything. He was getting older, ready to retire, and he wanted to sell the Double Bar Ranch. He offered Nathan first right of refusal at a price that was more than fair, with terms that would allow them to pay it off over time. It was a huge risk, taking on that kind of debt, but it was also the opportunity of a lifetime. Nathan and Annette talked long into the night, weighing the pros and cons, examining the finances from every angle. In the end, it was Annette who made the decision. "We take the risk," she said firmly. "We bet on ourselves, on our family. You know this ranch better than anyone, Nathan. You can make it successful, and I will be right beside you every step of the way." So they bought the ranch, and Nathan became not just a foreman, but an owner. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They worked harder than ever before, Nathan managing the ranch operations while Annette handled the books and the home front. They hired good men, treated them fairly, and slowly but surely, the Double Bar began to thrive under their ownership. Rose, James, and Grace grew up running wild across the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk, absorbing the lessons of hard work and integrity that their parents modeled every day. Rose, in particular, showed an aptitude for ranching that rivaled her father's, and Nathan often said she would run the place someday if she wanted. James was quieter, preferring books to horses, but he had a head for numbers that made Annette proud. Grace was the diplomat, the one who could charm anyone and smooth over any conflict. More children followed. Another son, Samuel, named for the man who had given Nathan his start, and finally, in 1896, twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Emma. Their house had long since been expanded, wings added on, and rooms built up, until it was a sprawling, comfortable home that rang with children's laughter and love. Miriam, who had never married, became a fixture in their lives, a beloved aunt and grandmother figure to the children. She eventually sold her boarding house in Randsburg and moved into a small cottage on the ranch property, happy to spend her final years surrounded by family. She and Annette grew even closer, more like mother and daughter than aunt and niece, and Miriam often marveled at how different Annette's life had turned out from what anyone could have predicted. "Do you ever miss Boston?" Miriam asked one afternoon as they sat on the porch watching the children play. Annette thought about it seriously before answering. "Sometimes I miss certain things. The theater, the museums, the ease of city life. But miss living there? No. This is my home, Miriam. These people, this land, this life. Nathan and I built something real here, something that matters. How could I miss anything when I have everything right here?" The years rolled by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The Double Bar Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Nathan's reputation grew, and he was often asked to mediate disputes or offer advice to other ranchers. He remained humble through it all, never forgetting where he came from, always treating everyone with respect regardless of their station. Annette became a pillar of the Randsburg community, involved in the church and the school, always ready to help a neighbor in need. She taught reading and writing to ranch hands who had never had the opportunity to learn, and she advocated fiercely for better education opportunities for all children in the area. The refined Boston lady who had arrived in California all those years ago had become a true Western woman, tough and capable and deeply rooted in her community. As their children grew and started families of their own, Nathan and Annette found themselves entering a new phase of life. They were grandparents now, delighting in Rose's children and James's and Grace's. The ranch was successful enough that Nathan could delegate more, spending more time with Annette, traveling occasionally, enjoying the fruits of their decades of hard work. They took a trip to San Francisco in 1905, their first real vacation in over 20 years. Walking along the waterfront, Annette slipped her hand into Nathan's and said, "Do you remember the night you found me?" "I remember every detail," Nathan replied. "I remember how terrified I was that I would not find you in time. I remember seeing you lying there and thinking I had failed. I remember the relief when I realized you were alive. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you had not searched for me. If you had decided it was too dangerous, too risky. I would have died out there, Nathan, but you did not give up. You never give up on the people you love." Nathan stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. They were older now, gray threading through their hair, lines marking their faces, but the love in his eyes was as intense as it had been that first night. "I could not give up on you. Even before I knew you, something in me recognized that you were important, that finding you mattered more than anything. And I was right. You are the most important thing in my life, Annette, you and our family, the life we have built. It all started that night in the storm, and I would search 1,000 storms to find you again." Annette kissed him right there on the busy San Francisco street, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except this man who had been her rock, her love, her everything for over 20 years. "I love you, Nathan Parker. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this beautiful life." They returned to the ranch renewed, ready to embrace whatever years remained to them. Those years were good ones, full of grandchildren and sunsets, of quiet mornings on the porch and laughter around the dinner table. Nathan and Annette had both come from loss and pain, had survived storms both literal and metaphorical, and they had built something beautiful from those hard beginnings. As they grew older, they made sure to tell their story to their grandchildren, wanting them to understand that love could come from unexpected places, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things. They talked about that stormy night, about the search and the rescue, about how two strangers became the most important people in each other's lives. "Your grandfather rode through a storm to find me," Annette would tell the wide-eyed children. "He did not know me, had no reason to risk himself, but he did it anyway. That is the kind of man he is. That is the kind of person you should all strive to be. Someone who does not give up, who fights for what is right, who loves with their whole heart." Nathan would add, "And your grandmother survived being thrown from a stagecoach and lying injured in a storm all night. She could have given up, could have let the cold and pain take her, but she fought. She is the strongest person I know. You all have her strength in you, and you should never forget that." The ranch continued to prosper under their stewardship, and eventually, true to Nathan's prediction, Rose took over day-to-day management. She ran it with the same integrity and intelligence her parents had modeled, making them both incredibly proud. James became a lawyer in Los Angeles but visited often, while Grace married a neighboring rancher and stayed close. Samuel went into politics, serving in the state legislature, and the twins, Thomas and Emma, both pursued teaching, spreading education across rural California. Nathan and Annette watched their children and grandchildren thrive, knowing that they had created a legacy that would outlast them. But more than the ranch, more than the success and respect they had earned, their greatest legacy was the love they had shared, the partnership they had built, the example they had set of what marriage could be when two people truly committed to each other. As they entered their 60s, both still active and engaged with life, they often found themselves reminiscing about their early days together. They would ride out to the old line shack, which they had maintained over the years, and sit on the porch watching the sunset just as they had done so many times before. "Do you have any regrets?" Nathan asked one evening, his arm around Annette's shoulders. "Not a single one," Annette replied without hesitation. "Every choice I made, every challenge we faced, it all led us here. How could I regret any of it when I am sitting here with you, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived? I used to worry in those early days that you would wake up one morning and realize you had settled for less than you deserved, that you would miss your old life and resent me for not being able to give you those things." Annette turned to look at him, placing her hand on his weathered cheek. "You gave me everything that mattered, Nathan. You gave me love, partnership, respect. You gave me a home and a family. You gave me yourself, completely and without reservation. How could that ever be settling? You were and are everything I could ever want." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would endure through anything. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of rain, and somewhere in the distance they could hear the sounds of their ranch, their legacy, their life. In 1915, Nathan and Annette celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. It was a joyous occasion, full of music and laughter and love. Nathan stood to make a toast, his hair completely white now, but his posture still strong, his eyes still bright with intelligence and humor. 32 years ago, I married the most incredible woman I have ever known. She had every reason to return to the safety and comfort of the life she had known back east. But instead, she chose to stay here with me, to build this life, to take a chance on love. Annette, you have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest adventure. Every day with you has been a gift. Here is to 32 more years, my love." Annette stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, and raised her own glass. "And here is to the cowboy who searched all night to find me, who never gave up, who showed me what true love really means. You are my hero, Nathan Parker, today and always." The years that followed were gentler, slower. Nathan and Annette finally let go of the day-to-day running of the ranch entirely, content to be advisors when needed, but mostly just enjoying each other and their family. They took up hobbies they had never had time for. Nathan carved beautiful pieces from wood, while Annette wrote down their story, wanting future generations to know exactly how their love had begun. They traveled a bit, visiting places they had always wanted to see, but they always returned to the ranch, to the home they had built, with relief and happiness. This was where they belonged, where their roots went deep, where their hearts lived. As they moved into their 70s, their health remained remarkably good, a testament to a life of hard work and clean living. They still took their evening walks, still sat on the porch watching sunsets, still held hands like newlyweds. Their children marveled at the love that had not diminished with time, but seemed only to deepen and strengthen. In the spring of 1920, Nathan took Annette back to the exact spot where he had found her that stormy night 37 years earlier. The area looked different now, more settled, with a road where there had only been a rough track. But standing there, they could both feel the weight of that night, the miracle of their meeting. "I think about the odds sometimes," Nathan said quietly. "What if the storm had been a day earlier or later? What if I had taken a different route? What if I had decided not to search? So many tiny moments that could have changed everything." "But they did not," Annette replied firmly. "You were there. You searched. You found me. Some things are just meant to be, Nathan. We were meant to find each other, to love each other, to build this life together. I have never doubted that for a single moment." Nathan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Neither have I. You are my destiny, Annette Parker. You always have been." They stood there for a long time, two elderly people holding each other in the spot where their story had begun, grateful for every moment they had been given, for every challenge they had overcome, for every joy they had shared. The love that had begun in crisis and fear had grown into something beautiful and enduring, a love story that would be told and retold by their descendants for generations to come. As they walked back to their horse, moving slower now but still steady, still together, Annette looked back one last time at the place where Nathan had found her. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to Nathan, to fate, to God, or to some combination of all three. "Thank you for that storm. Thank you for that night. Thank you for leading us to each other." Nathan heard her and smiled, squeezing her hand gently. He did not need to respond with words. After nearly 4 decades together, they understood each other perfectly, could communicate entire conversations with just a look or a touch. That was the gift of a long, deep love, the ability to be truly known, truly understood, truly cherished. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in brilliant colors, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and had spent a lifetime walking in the light together. The stagecoach accident that could have ended Annette's life had instead been the beginning of something greater than either of them could have imagined. From tragedy had come triumph, from fear had come love, and from a single night of desperate searching had come a lifetime of happiness. The Double Bar Ranch thrived for generations after Nathan and Annette were gone, a testament to the foundation they had built. But more than the physical legacy of land and cattle, they left behind something more precious, the example of a love that had conquered every obstacle, that had grown stronger with each passing year, that had created a family bound not just by blood, but by the values their parents had instilled. In the years that followed, whenever storms rolled across the California desert, the descendants of Nathan and Annette Parker would pause and remember the story they had been told so many times. They would remember the cowboy who had ridden through the night, refusing to give up, driven by something he could not name but could not ignore. They would remember the woman who had survived against all odds, who had chosen love over fear, adventure over safety, a rough cowboy over the life of ease she had known. And they would remember that the greatest loves often begin in the most unexpected ways, that sometimes we have to lose ourselves completely to find what we were always meant to have, and that a single act of courage and compassion can change not just one life, but generations of lives to come. Nathan and Annette Parker lived well into their 80s, a remarkable achievement for their time, and they passed away within 6 months of each other, neither able to bear living long without the other half of their soul. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built, under a sky as wide and blue as the one that had stretched above them on their wedding day. Their headstone, chosen by their children, bore simple words that captured the essence of their extraordinary love. She was lost in the storm. He searched until he found her. Together, they found home. And so their story ended where it had begun, in the wild, beautiful desert of California, in the land they had loved and tamed together, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built. It was a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of perseverance, courage, and an open heart. From a single stormy night had come a lifetime of love, and from that love had come a family, a home, and a story that would never be forgotten.